Good morning. My name is Martin Jönsson, and I'm the CEO of AlzeCure Pharma. Very welcome to today's seminar from AlzeCure Pharma, where we will give an update on our research platform, Painless. Last fall, we had updates on our platforms, NeuroRestore and Alzstatin. But today, we will look at the progress we are having in the Painless platform. Today's presenters are me, Martin Jönsson, and then we have Märta Segerdahl, who is our Chief Medical Officer. We have Pontus Forsell, who is our Head of Research and Discovery. And then Johan Sandin, who is our Chief Scientific Officer. The agenda for today, where we are focusing on the Painless platform, is that we will begin to look at the chronic pain market. And here we will have a presentation by Märta Segerdahl. Thereafter, we will go in and look at AlzeCure's vision and our goals and an overview of the company. Thereafter, we will go in and focus in on the Painless platform, presenting our two projects, TrkA-NAM, focusing on osteoarthritis and other severe pain conditions. And thereafter, we will go into our second project, which is ACD440, focusing on neuropathic pain. And in this program, we have had recent progress and have reported positive data. And then we will end the day by having a panel discussion and a Q&A, which we will have during the last 25 minutes, starting at 10 o'clock. So, and then ending with a closing remark. And with this, I would like to hand over to Märta Segerdahl, who is a medical doctor, PhD, and an associate professor, and who is also our Chief Medical Officer. Please, Märta.
Thank you, Martin. So, being the Chief Medical Officer of AlzeCure Pharma is super interesting for somebody like me, who is a specialist in pain management and also have been doing clinical research and having seen clinical patients for many, many years, and then joined industry several years ago, working both actually within pain, but also within neurodegeneration. So pain has always been known to humans. We've had pain, tried to cure pain for thousands of years. Even the Iceman, Osteo, was found in South Tyrolia, had acupuncture marks on his back. And there have been findings of marijuana in Stonehenge. So this is something that actually followed us for thousands of years and probably before that. But it hasn't really solved the problem. We need something new that is more efficacious. And since we still have pain as a huge problem, we need to understand what is it. So it's an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience that is caused by an injury or trauma, or reminds of such an experience. So actually 1 out of 5 individuals suffer from chronic pain, and that's a significant amount. And a large proportion of them actually have neuropathic pain, which I will tell you a little bit more about. This, of course, has huge implications for GNP, so for huge direct costs, but also it's a common reason for work disability that is the most common in Europe. It's as large as all of psychiatry together. And that is something that people aren't normally aware of. So it's time to bring that up to a more common knowledge. And of course, it also affects the individual with large indirect costs, with economic burden, poor quality of life, and for poor physical function, and this leading to very poor mental well-being. And the chronic pain population is particularly vulnerable when it comes to suicide risk. It's as common in chronic pain patients as it is in depression. And it's linked directly to the intensity of pain. So if we can do anything to reduce the intensity of pain in patients, even if we don't take it away, that's going to not solve the problem, but it's going to make it much easier to cope in life. So every one of us has actually experienced pain. Toothache, or you sprained your ankle doing sports, or something of the kind. And then it heals and pain goes away. But for some individuals, this pain persists long after the injury has healed. And then we call it chronic. And that at that point, there is this reorganization in the nervous system, both in the peripheral nervous system and in the brain and in the spinal cord. And at that point, pain has become a disease of its own called chronic pain. So in the acute sense, it's a warning signal that we should take account of and act by. But in the chronic sense, in the long term, it's actually something that is unnecessary and does not help us. So there's different types of pain. So in three major types, there's a whole bundle of different sub-indications, but three large portions, which one is the nociceptive pain, which most people know about, is pain in osteoarthritis, in gout, after trauma, from cancer tumors, and other things. Neuropathic pain is often less well known. It's pain due to either a disease, a progressive disease, or as of the nervous system, but it could also be a long-lasting pain after an injury to a nerve, for instance, after surgery or trauma. And at the bottom, you see something called primary pain, nociplastic pain. That's something that we will not talk about today at all. It's indications like fibromyalgia, which most people have heard of, and we don't really know what causes them. Now, for nociceptive pain, we have a number of typical conditions. So for instance, osteoarthritis pain or chronic low back pain, which is normally at least partly a part of osteoarthritis pain. But it also includes pain not only for joints, but also from adjacent tissues like tendons and muscles. Very many people in the world actually suffer from OA pain, either in the West world, because we don't move around enough, we sit too much, or in poorer areas of the world where people are overstrained. Very many people have chronic low back pain, probably some of you, I would guess. Our standard of care, which is non-steroidals like diclofenac or ibuprofen or naproxen, they actually have poor efficacy in these chronic conditions, as do the second-line analgesics, for instance, like opioids, which we know also are prone for tolerance development, and they have an abuse potential. Sometimes we inject steroids in the joints. That's also quite invasive. So we need something that's actually better than that. So for treatment gaps, then, if 5 out of 6 don't get sufficient pain relief with existing therapies, that is something we need to address. But that could be either due to that they don't respond, or that they have so much problems with their side effects that they actually cannot continue taking them. And a lot of people actually should not take them because they have heart disease, or they have asthma, or other conditions where it's not compatible with their disease mechanisms or their drugs for that matter. We had great hopes to the anti-NGF antibodies that were under development for many years. They were not approved as late as this year because of the increased risk for side effects compared to the potential benefit. So that's another sort of hope that went down. So currently, there's a number of different research projects looking at understanding disease mechanism, and then also to develop new disease modifiers. But we don't have anything yet. So we really need to have something that can help attenuating these symptoms of long-standing nociceptive pain. When it comes to peripheral neuropathic pain, a large number of these patients suffer this as a lifelong condition, even progressing over years. Now, there's a number of different groups of patients, and I would like to start with this one, which is the largest group, which is painful diabetic polyneuropathy, or other types of painful neuropathies, where they describe their symptoms as pins and needles, constant pins and needles in your feet, for instance, or even your hands. Or they can describe it as they're walking on coals on fire. Not very, it's very descriptive, but it's not something that we'd like to experience ourselves. There's also patients who have problems after nerve injury, for instance, after surgery or other types of trauma. And they they have to really be really careful when it comes to different stimuli. So it sounds like stimuli is something not very problematic, but it actually is that perhaps they cannot wear their bed sheets because it hurts so much when they have them to the skin, or they are afraid of going on public transportation because they can bump into people, and that causes them an increase in the pain that will last for many hours. Another group is actually patients with post-herpetic neuralgia, which in Norwegian and Danish is actually called hellfire. And they are very sensitive to touch, and this is actually quite common in elderly people who have had shingles. So they're extremely underserved because there's nothing really that helps them. So neuropathic pain is common, but it's invisible. One thing is because you can't see that there's an injury, but the other thing is that these patients don't necessarily go out and mingle and talk about the neuropathic pain. About 10% of patients suffer after surgery. And there's a number of different, this is just a listing of different indications or different states and diseases that can actually also have pain as a part of the symptomatology. But looking at the numbers, if you look at painful diabetic neuropathy, for instance, as many people suffer from that as patients suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So what is the impact for the individual and for society of chronic pain? Well, of course, the health-related quality of life is rather poor. Is rated as poor as for patients with severe heart disease or depression or poorly controlled diabetes. It's also a disease of the family and friends because you have a limited social life and your family actually needs to cover up for whatever abilities you don't have. So quality of life is more dependent also on the severity of pain than on its underlying cause. Normally, we say that neuropathic pain is more severe, and that's not because it's neuropathic, but it's because it's persistent. So usually patients stay up at night, they can't sleep because the pain is often worsened at night when you're supposed to sleep. So therefore it's associated with worse health and also increased suicidality. In a survey that they had in the UK a number of years ago, 17% of those who had neuropathic pain, they actually scored quality of life as equivalent to worse than death. This sounds very terrible. And you say, well, don't we have therapies? Well, we don't have very many therapies. The two tools that we have, they don't fit all. And instead, we need to have a better understanding so that we can develop a toolkit that will enable us to drive development to give us the right treatment to the right patient. We're not there yet, but we can see that it's coming in the future. When it comes to neuropathic pain, there is a really high unmet need for new treatments. As you can see, these charts here, the blue sections are actually the number of patients who, if you look at it in the long term, are actually helped by these therapies. So it's not necessarily so that you add up the different sections and you have half the cake, but they actually sum up to about 1/3 of the cake. So 2/3 of patients are not well treated at all. There's also it doesn't say that, or it doesn't mean that these patients nobody has any help, because they happen to help a subset of patients, but we can't tell at this point in time who will be helped from what. There's also a number of other treatments that are less well used or that help an even smaller subset of patients. And we don't necessarily want to use opioids because they don't help. They're not efficacious, and they also have a lot of side effects, as we've become increasingly aware of these last 20 years or so. The situation is not much better in chronic nociceptive pain like OA pain and low back pain. So in the acute state, you can have some help from nonsteroidals, but they still don't help everyone, and certainly not in chronic low back pain. And also, nociceptive pain increases with age. So more and more people, the older you are, the higher the risk that you actually have or develop chronic nociceptive pain. But that also increases the risk or the probability of you having cardiovascular disease, asthma, gastritis, and a number of other problems, like renal failure, which mean that you cannot or should not take these medications. So the topicals are good for sprains and strains, but they don't have very good efficacy over time. And opioids that people say, well, you can always take an opioid. They're nice and strong. Yeah, they're strong and they're very good in acute pain. But in chronic pain, they don't have a place in the treatment palette. So in summary, still 1 out of 6 to 7 patients actually have good efficacy of the treatments we have. And as you can see from the total numbers, that means that there's a lot of patients who actually need new treatment options. As we become more and more aware, this opioid epidemic in the US has put focus on opioids as abuse deterrent or abuse liable. And there is a huge drive and need for development of drugs that are non-opioids. And actually in the US, the FDA and the NIH and other agencies, they actually promote the development of non-opioid painkillers. So in summary, chronic pain is disabling and it affects about 1 in 5 people worldwide. These patients have a very low quality of life. This chronic pain and low quality of life also has a huge impact on employment because they can't stay at work because it's painful and they get fired. Family economy is, of course, suffering, physical function, and thereby also mental health. So those are the indirect costs, but also direct societal costs are very high. So there is really a high unmet need for better and more specific and safer treatments. And that's why I think it's so fascinating to work at AlzeCure, where we actually have 2 options of developing something that is new and hopefully will improve the situation for all of these patients. Thank you.
So, thank you so very much, Märta, for this presentation. It's now my turn to present the company overview and the goals for the company. When it comes to AlzeCure Pharma, the company was founded in 2016 out of a research foundation which was sponsored by the Swedish Alzheimer's Fund. We are a very experienced team with long experience from the pharmaceutical industry with research, development, as well as commercialization. We are based in Stockholm at Karolinska Institute, Novum Science Park. And our focus is Alzheimer's disease and pain. And these are, as we all know, areas of huge unmet medical need. The project we are pursuing, we are doing in 3 different research platforms. We have NeuroRestore, which is a novel, first-in-class symptomatic treatment for cognitive disorders focusing on Alzheimer's disease. Then we have Alzstatin, which is an innovative disease-modifying treatment against Alzheimer's disease. And then our 3rd platform, which is a project platform for our pain projects, where we are driving innovative project for osteoarthritis and neuropathic pain with actually opportunities to also do other projects. And as a company, we are listed in Stockholm at Nasdaq, First North Premier Growth Market. And we have a market cap of around 260 million and a cash position of 94 million as reported in the last interim report. Our business model as a company is that we are a research and development company. We are focusing on driving our projects to early clinical phase and then to out-license them or partner with other pharmaceutical companies who can then commercialize them. And this to get upfront payments, milestone payments, and royalties on sold products. Our primary focus area is truly Alzheimer's disease. And Alzheimer's disease is, as we know, a devastating disease for patients. And for society, Alzheimer's disease and dementia cost more than cardiovascular disease and oncology together. And when it comes to the patient population and the costs for society, they are expected to triple in the coming 30 years. And this is due to the aging population, having people living longer and longer. But it's not getting more uncommon to not getting Alzheimer's disease. So we really need a cure and treatment for this devastating disease. And the way we are pursuing Alzheimer's disease is with two different platforms. We are having alstatin, which is a disease-modifying treatment targeting the production of amyloid plaque to really try to stop the development of Alzheimer's disease. And here we are developing an oral small molecule. And then we are also having a symptomatic treatment that we are developing for patients who already have developed Alzheimer's disease or cognitive disorders. And this is NeuroRestore. And NeuroRestore is focusing on improving the neural function. Our second area of focus is pain. And pain is truly an area of a lot of suffering. Suicide due to chronic pain is as common as due to depression. Not many people know that. Also, that chronic pain is also the most common cause for sick leaves, which is devastating, of course, for the people having the pain, but it also creates a high societal cost and employer costs. And then we also have the opioid crisis in the US, which is huge, which is actually reversing the mean average lifespans of Americans. So we can truly say that there's a huge unmet medical need in the pain area, and not many people know this. When it comes to our platform, Painless, where we are pursuing the pain projects, we have two projects. We have one for neuropathic pain, and that is ACD440. And here is a lot of patients, millions of patients, more than 25, 30 million patients, and more than half of these are not experiencing adequate pain relief with the current treatments. Then we also have a project against osteoarthritis and other severe pain conditions, and that is TrkA-NAM. In TrkA-NAM, with regard to osteoarthritis, there's today more than 250 million patients. And this patient population is also growing a lot. And this is due to the increasing overweight problems and also due to the aging population. And in the company, we have a very busy pipeline, which we are very proud of. And all of our projects are small molecule programs. And we have 6 programs, 2 in each platform. NeuroRestore, we have 2, ACD856, which is in phase 1, where we are now conducting a SAD study. And then we have alstatin, 2 projects. And then in the Painless platform, we are having ACD440 and TrkA-NAM. And as you maybe already know, we have just communicated positive results from our 1B study for ACD440 for neuropathic pain. So we are now on our way to go into preparing a phase 2 study. And for us as a company, becoming a phase 2 company, which feels great. And as I said, the ACD856 for cognitive disorders focusing on Alzheimer's disease is ongoing and fully funded. And when it comes to our goals for this year, the goals that we have communicated was a readout of our clinical 1B study, Painless ACD440. We have reported on this before a communicated timeline, the positive readout. We are now also And the next goal is to have a readout on our clinical 1A SAD study for NeuroRestore 856, which we are expecting this summer. And thereafter, we are planning to start the next NeuroRestore ACD 856 1A MAD study in the second half of this year. And then in the fall to select a drug candidate for TrkA-NAM. And then in the fall to file for a 2A clinical study for Painless ACD 440 for neuropathic pain. So for us, 2021 is a busy year, following up a great 2020. So thank you for that. And Pontus, please.
Thank you, Martin. My name is Pontus Forsell. I'm head of research and discovery at AlzeCure Pharma. I have a background in drug discovery. I've been working with drug discovery in industrial setting for more than 20 years, and the last 12 years especially focusing on neurotrophins and intervention on neurotrophins. Today I will talk about the TrkA-NAM program. So the goal with the TrkA-NAM is to develop a selective negative allosteric modulator of TrkA for the treatment of osteoarthritis and other severe pain disorders. So there's essentially three key messages in this slide. The first message is that the pathway that we are targeting is a validated pathway within pain. Mutations in the gene for nerve growth factor, or NGF, or its receptor TrkA, actually leads to loss of pain sensation in man. The anti-NGF antibodies has proven clinical efficacy in reducing pain in patients with osteoarthritis. The second message is that we are currently in lead optimization. We have developed potent and selective TrkA-NAM molecules. The compounds are active in both models of nociceptive pain and neuropathic pain. And the third message that Märta has also mentioned, that there's a really huge medical need within the pain field, both for nociceptive pain treatment and for neuropathic pain treatment. So this slide shows you, give you a background of the role of NGF and TrkA in pain signaling. So upon an injury, the first step is that NGF is released from the surrounding tissue. The injury can be either in the skin, that is outside the body, or inside the body, let's say from a joint in a patient with osteoarthritis. So the first step indicated by one here is that NGF is released. And the second step is when NGF binds to its receptor TrkA. That can be on neuronal cells or on non-neuronal cells like inflammatory cells. This second step initiates a cascade of different events leading to the actual pain sensation, as indicated by the number 3s here. It could involve upregulation and increased activity of ion channels, here exemplified by TRPV1, which is the target for ACD 440, like Johan will talk more about. It can also involve upregulation of other pain mediators like substance P, CGRP, or other ion channels. From inflammatory cells, there is a release of diverse inflammatory mediators like prostaglandins, bradykinin, and histamine. The anti-NGF antibodies work by inhibiting the interaction between NGF and its receptor TrkA. We think that small molecules may have several advantages over anti-NGF antibodies, like dosing regimen, cost of goods, and also side effects. This slide shows gives a little background about the neurotrophins and the signaling of the different neurotrophins. So NGF is 1 out of 4 neurotrophins, the other being BDNF, NT3, and NT4. The different neurotrophins bind to 3 distinct receptors called TrkA, TrkB, or TrkC. They also bind to a common neurotrophin called P75NTR. In our NeuroRestore program, we are targeting the TrkA, TrkB, and TrkC with positive allosteric modulator to improve memory and cognition. The pain signaling of NGF was actually first discovered, interestingly enough, in a clinical study in Alzheimer's with patients with Alzheimer's disease, where the patients received injections of NGF to promote neuronal survival and support. One of the side effects with this injection was actually an intense acute pain at the site of injection, thus demonstrating that NGF indeed has a role in acute pain sensation. I mentioned before that the anti-NGF antibodies are targeting NGF here, so they inhibit the signaling to TrkA. But what they also do is that they inhibit the signaling via P75-NTR by blocking the interaction of both NGF and pro-NGF. So the anti-NGF antibodies are selective for NGF, but they are really not selective for the downstream signaling. In the TrkA-NAM program, we are targeting the TrkA receptor, and we think that this is a more selective mechanism than both the anti-NGF antibodies or the non-selective TrkA kinase inhibitors. This slide is a cartoon showing the different phases of drug discovery and development. The chemical series that we have within TrkA-NAM was actually first belonging to the NeuroRestore program, where we are identifying positive allosteric modulators. After a couple of years, we identified selective TrkA negative allosteric modulators within this series, and we were able to carve out the TrkA-NAM program from NeuroRestore, thereby bypassing the first time-consuming and highly risky steps of the drug discovery chain. So by doing this, we have progressed TrkA-NAM in a very time-effective manner and also cost-effective manner, thereby adding substantial value to the company. This gives the history of the TrkA-NAM program in a different angle. I said before that we first identified the chemical series of the TrkA-NAM as positive modulators, and you can see that to the left here in the figure. After a couple of years, we identified the low potent selective TrkA-NAM molecules, and still after a couple of years, we were able to carve out and really progress the project with its own chemical resources and develop very, very potent and selective TrkA-NAM molecules, as can be seen to the right here. So in 2020, only 2 years after we were dedicating chemical resources to this project, we actually had synthesized compounds that were much more potent than our competitors, here indicated by a compound from Pfizer in red. And also this has led to that we have actually a toolbox of many different compounds available for selection and development. TrkA-NAM molecules, but also TrkA kinase inhibitors and anti-NGF antibodies has demonstrated analgesic effects in many different models, including acute and chronic pain models, as well as nociceptive and neuropathic pain models. We have tested our TrkA-NAM compounds in 2 different models of pain. To the left is a model of osteoarthritis pain, and you can see that our TrkA-NAM molecule has significant analgesic effect. In the figure to the right, we have tested a TrkA-NAM molecule in a model of neuropathic pain. And also indicated in the green line is significant analgesic effect, almost at the same level as the positive control duloxetine, which was actually given at a much higher dose. So to conclude this slide, we can demonstrate that TrkA-NAM molecules are effective in both osteoarthritis pain and in neuropathic pain models. We think that there is actually limited competition ahead of us with respect to a small molecule approach targeting the TrkA receptor. This table summarizes some of the IC50 values that we have obtained in-house, where we have compared one of our molecules, 27628, against 3 other molecules. Compound number 10 from Array Pharma and compound 23 from Pfizer is our compounds that we actually have synthesized and compared head-to-head with our internal compounds. The compound number 10 from Array Pharma is what we think at least is the clinical candidate that AlzeCure is pursuing in 2 clinical phase 2 studies for osteoarthritis and low back pain. Compound 23 was Pfizer's frontrunner. And as can be seen, our TrkA-NAM molecule is actually 10-fold more potent and 10-fold more selective than the clinical candidate being run by AlzeCure. So we think that this is, well, on a personal note, it's really a great achievement from the company. It's not very often that you see picomolar potency in compounds. I've seen 1 or 2 papers during my entire research career. No one at the company has ever synthesized this potent compound. So that's good from a side effect perspective, of course, but also that you can really reduce the dose to patients. To summarize this, NGF and TrkA are involved in pain cessation and validated targets for pain treatment. Selective TrkA-NAM molecules could be a safer approach than anti-NGF antibodies. At AlzeCure Pharma, we have identified highly potent, highly selective, and in vivo active TrkA-NAM molecules. The preclinical characterization of these compounds is currently ongoing, and we think that there is limited competition ahead of us with respect to a small molecule approach. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Pontus. Now let's turn to our clinical candidate in the Painless platform, ACD440. So my name is Johan Sandin, and I'm a co-founder and also the Chief Scientific Officer here at AlzeCure Pharma. So ACD440 targets a biological mechanism known as the TRPV1, also known as vanilloid receptor 1 or VR1 for short. This is a protein that plays a central role in pain signaling. And as you can see here on the illustration to the right, it is placed in a central spot to be activated or sensitized by a number of different factors, which include temperature, heat, low pH, factors or molecules that are found within the body, such as nerve growth factor, as we heard Pontus talk about, inflammatory mediators such as bradykinin, prostaglandins, etc., but also factors from outside. Most well-known probably being capsaicin, which is the active ingredient in chili peppers. And if you've ever chopped chili peppers, got it on your fingers, and accidentally put that in your eye or in your mouth, you have experienced the type of intensive pain that activation of VR1 receptors actually cause. Now, the VR1 receptor is located in the cell membrane, as can be shown here on the illustration to the right, and it's widely distributed in the body, which includes skin, mucosal tissues, sensory nerve fibers, but also in the eye and blood vessels. Interestingly, the VR1 receptor is upregulated in pathological conditions, such as in neuropathic pain patients, making this an indication that is of high interest for this biological mechanism. Now, if we look at ACD440, this asset was in-licensed in January 2020, and it's a small molecule compound acting to block VR1 signaling. So it's a VR1 antagonist that was originally in development as an oral drug for nociceptive pain, or more specifically, osteoarthritis. The compound has been into clinical studies, confirming its mode of action. And interestingly, there are also data showing from preclinical studies that it has analgesic effects in models of neuropathic pain. Now, these data, combined with the fact that you have this upregulation of VR1 receptors in neuropathic pain patients, you have a localization also in the skin, and the physicochemical properties of the compound being suitable for a topical formulation, led us to the development of a topical gel for the phase 1b proof of mechanism study with the aim to target peripheral neuropathic pain. We have also had the advantage of having large quantities of synthesized compound available for the clinical studies that came with the in-licensing deal. Now, going back to pain as an area. Now, we heard Märta talk about these 3 different areas of pain. You have the nociceptive, the neuropathic, and the primary nociplastic pain. As I mentioned here, we are focusing primarily on neuropathic pain, where, as we heard, this is an area with a huge unmet medical need. The majority is poorly treated, and still 7 to 8% of all adults have pain with neuropathic pain characteristics. The standard of care have poor efficacy in these patients and leading to really poor quality of life in a lot of patients. As we heard, 17% rated their quality of life scores equivalent and worse than death. So this is something that has a significant impact on daily living. Patients often show hypersensitivity. So that's an increased sensitivity, and even a normal brush may be actually painful for these patients. So this will add substantially to the ongoing pain, both in intensity and in time. With ACD440, we're targeting peripheral neuropathic pain, and we're aiming for patients with hypersensitivity, i.e. increased sensitivity to sensory stimulation, which includes patients with post-operative or post-traumatic neuropathy, but as well as painful polyneuropathy or post-herpetic neuralgia. And upregulated VR1 receptors can be present in all of these etiologies. And actually this way of stratifying the patients or patient selection based on their sensitivity profiles or sensory profiles is something that's been the focus of an IMI group at EU, which was where Märta actually played a leading role, where they've developed kind of sample size recommendations and recommendations moving forward with this type of patient selection criteria. And this was also published in the highly reviewed journal called Pain. Now, there are also other indications possible for ACD440. There is clearly evidence that VR1 plays a key role also in nociceptive pain, and we have preclinical data with 440 showing potent effects in several models of nociceptive pain. So there is a possibility or a potential to also widen the indication scope for this molecule. Now, if we then move to the phase 1b proof of mechanism study that was recently communicated. This was a study that we initiated according to plan in December last year. This was a prospective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study where we looked at both safety, efficacy, and pharmacokinetics, which is looking at the exposure of the compound using the ACD440 gel. All 24 subjects were subjected to all treatments, so all subjects had both placebo and compound, so they were their own controls, if you will. We were assessing 3 different skin conditions to look at the different types of skin that the compound would encounter in the patient trials. So both looking at normal skin, so looking at tolerability and efficacy of the drug on normal skin. Stripped skin, which is where you put a tape on the skin and remove that, which removes the outer cell layer of the skin, assessing the tolerability and efficacy on skin with an impaired barrier. We also had skin exposed to a light sunburn using UVB radiation to look at tolerability efficacy on inflamed skin. We also conducted a separate study where we measured the plasma concentration of the drug of ACD440 in 8 subjects with larger areas treated, and that study is going to read out within the month. Now turning to the methodology that we used in the POM study. So all subjects had 6 predefined areas specified on their backs that were either UVB irradiated, so inflamed skin, or stripped or normal skin. And they were treated with either placebo or compound, and obviously blinded to both the investigator and the subject. The subject were then put in front of a laser, which was focused on these specific areas, which evoked pain. Now, this pain was then measured in 2 ways, both looking at pain signals using brain waves, EEG, but the subjects were also asked to assess their pain using a rating scale. Moreover, we looked at hypersensitivity, mechanical hypersensitivity, and the amount of pressure required to induce pain in these specific areas using something similar like a pinprick test. And again, the patients were asked to rate their pain. Now looking at the study results, which we communicated on April 19, the study execution was in full alignment with the time plan. So we did not have any delays due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which was obviously very good news to us. We were able to conduct the study. We did not have any dropouts. We did not have any safety adverse events, showing that the compound was well tolerated in the subjects and in this study with this topical type of formulation. The top-line data that we communicated on April 19 showed that we had highly significant analgesic effect with ACD440, both looking at laser-evoked pain and mechanical sensitivities on both of these different types of endpoints. Interestingly, we saw this highly significant effect both when we looked at the EEGs, that is the brain waves, as well as when we looked at the subject's own ratings of pain. Moreover, we also saw significant effects in all of the 3 different skin conditions, which is also, I think, a key step for us moving forward into the next phase. Plasma concentration analysis is currently ongoing, as I mentioned. We will get that during the coming month. Now, for the next steps with ACD440, we are now preparing for the phase 2A study that's currently ongoing. We have initiated production of the study drug. As I mentioned, we already have compounds synthesized, so it's actually production of the topical gel that we're conducting for the phase 2A study. We plan to apply for a pre-IND meeting with the FDA prior to the phase 2A study. We also aim to submit the clinical trial application, as Martin mentioned, by the end of the year. And we are working closely with our scientific advisory board of international experts in the neuropathic pain field to optimize the clinical program for ACD440. And we're also developing the full clinical development plan for the way to the market. Now, if we turn to the market, and we see ACD440 having a significant market opportunity. As we heard Märta talk about before, there's a high unmet medical need in the neuropathic pain area, so even small market shares could translate into a significant business opportunity. We have the opioid epidemic that we heard about before. This is really put the focus on non-opioid approaches in the area, avoiding the side effects and the problem with abuse and addiction. There is also a growing patient base that will provide a total market growth. And we see that ACD440 has the potential to be first in class and also has the potential placed as a first-line treatment. There is also a possibility to have as an add-on to orals, and we see this market being large, and there are not many direct competitors on the market or in the pipeline. So to summarize, ACD440 is an antagonist of the VR1, which is a mechanism that's central in pain signaling. There is also an upregulation of VR1 receptors in neuropathic pain, which has kind of moved us towards the direction of our primary indication, which is peripheral neuropathic pain, which is an area of huge unmet medical need that we heard about before. We recently conducted the proof of mechanism phase 1b study, which showed highly significant analgesic effects with no tolerability issues. And we're now planning the phase 2a study and plan to submit the clinical trial application by the end of the year. Thank you.
Oj, vad lätt den var. Ja.
Okay. So for you who are waiting and wondering what's happening, we are soon starting up a panel discussion and a Q&A. Please be with us.
Okay. And my name is Anders Hedlund. I am a equity analyst at RedEye's life science team, and I cover, among other companies, AlzeCure Pharma. And I will be hosting this panel discussion with you guys. So great to have you here. Thank you for very interesting presentations. We are in a time where we talk a lot about pandemics and epidemics. And now you have mentioned epidemics a couple of times, or Märta actually mentioned the word. So would you, just short answers, would you agree, do we have a epidemic of an opioid crisis currently?
Without doubt, yes.
Yes, I would agree. This is a major issue, and it's been brought up by several key opinion leaders also in the field. So this is obviously something that's a major issue.
Yeah, I agree fully, and anything that can avoid addiction problems with opioids will have huge beneficial effects for the patients.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Märta, can you elaborate a bit further on this concept that there is an epidemic going on with opioids?
Well, a very common reason for starting with opioids is actually pain, at least for some patients or many patients. And then there is a substantial amount of overprescription because there's not knowledge enough actually among physicians, many physicians who aren't pain management specialists. And this then gives the patients the sad opportunity, I should say, to actually have increased tolerance and have or develop an abuse of the drug, or illicit use even going further. And this crisis actually causes more deaths per year in the US than do traffic accidents. They have quite a few traffic accidents in the US. So it's more than suicides, and it's more than traffic accidents.
And so the unmet medical need in this field was really a red thread in your section, Märta. And this epidemic really points to this unmet medical need. So why, if I look at the treatment landscape, I cannot really see that much of innovation and new efficacious treatments coming to the market. I don't know if you agree, but why is that?
Well, if I knew, I would be happy to tell you. I know that right now in the coming drugs, the drugs that are actually in phase 2 and 3 now are mainly generics. So the gabapentin and Lyrica, they have come off patent, and now there's a lot of similars under development from different companies. So that's really where the field is going. But because has not been seen as an attractive market, because there have been companies having huge market shares, like duloxetine, for instance, which is a so-called SNRI. So it's a more widely touching more targets than the general antidepressants. And they have shown some efficacy across. But I think one reason is also that it's been difficult because companies have not realized, and society and regulators have not realized, that you have to pinpoint the effect cause of the pain, not the etiology that caused the pain to start with, but you have to understand the mechanism of the pain. And unless you do that, it's going to be difficult. There's been quite a few drugs going through phase 2. But as you know, you need more than one shot on goal actually to reach there. So I think that this is but the interest in pharma industry has actually been increasing over the last few years. And I think there's going to be a lot of things coming, and hopefully they're, well, not ahead of us, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. So a good wrap up there, Märta, because then I thought we could dig into your 2 projects within pain, because they really qualify, in my view, as innovative and potentially first in class. That let's have them each by each. Starting with TrkA-NAM. Really promising, although early. Can you tell us a little bit what data you have generated so far in this project?
We have quite much preclinical data, of course, being a preclinical project. We have demonstrated good potency in cellular-based models, good selectivity in more complex functional cell models, and more recently we have also demonstrated in vivo efficacy in these 2 models that I mentioned. One was for the osteoarthritis pain and one in neuropathic pain. We have a good toolbox of compounds that we can select from, I think.
And with ACD440, you recently published positive results. Can you just how would you label that study? Really, you said it was a proof of mechanism, Johan.
Yes, exactly. So it was although obviously we had several different outcomes. So we're both looking at tolerability of the compound and the actual product, the topical product, but also looking at early efficacy signals, looking at analgesic efficacy with this topical formulation, because that had not been tried before. As I mentioned, the compound had been into clinical trials before, so we had clinical evidence that confirmed its mode of action, but we had never tested it as a topical compound before. So this was obviously something we wanted to test to see that we'd actually penetrate the skin and reach the target. So that was a critical finding for us. So that's.
So what are you, and will the next study be what I would refer to as a proof of concept study?
Märta, maybe you want to take a bit about the potential design of the study. Yeah.
Of course, yes. I mean, it will be have a clinical endpoint, so pain intensity. So of course, yes, that will qualify as a proof of concept study, a phase 2 study. And we're working on the design details right now, working hard on that. So I can't give you much more details, but it's definitely going to be a proof of concept study.
So, and you have outlined a brief timeline for 440, but in my interpretation, if everything goes according to plan, it would basically mean that AlzeCure would become a phase 2 company by the end of this year, potentially.
Potentially, yes.
Wow.
Yes, it's a big step, and I think it's quite impressive in licensing the project last year and so quickly drive it. Now having these positive results, preparing for an IND meeting with a focus, of course, then for the US, and then to drive for a phase 2 study. And yes, it can be in the end of this year, but we need to take our time, so it's more likely it will be in the coming year. So,
but nonetheless, a huge milestone for the company on corporate level.
Absolutely.
And can you say anything about the potential business interest after you communicated the results, or is it too early?
The same day we communicated the positive results, we got a request for BD meetings.
Okay.
So I think that communicates the interest there is. So if we didn't even communicate exact data, we see this big interest. And I mean, also for TrkA-NAM, Pontus didn't mention that already for TrkA-NAM, there has been deals done on similar compounds, generating tens of millions in upfront payments on preclinical assets. And this also indicates the interest there, and we already now also have BD interest there. And with Pontus showing the data, the quality of the molecules, it looks quite exciting. And I think for us, AlzeCure, both be able to show that we can drive development, as we are doing with ACD440, and then also showing that we as a discovery company, finding the target, developing the molecule, and now testing it in preclinical models. That's quite something. So I think AlzeCure is really showing that it is really a discovery, research, and development company.
Yeah, great achievement. So, and if I stay in the 440 project, so you reformulated it to a gel. What is the? How should so 440 targets peripheral neuropathic pain, and TrkA-NAM, you said that it is towards nociceptive pain, but you sort of see a potential intersection there. Starting with the gel formulation, then this is how broad should I think in terms of indication potential? Labels and further indications.
Yeah. So again, we are aiming for patients with hypersensitivity. So that is found in different type of neuropathic pain conditions. So that includes, as I mentioned, post-traumatic neuropathy, for example, or post-herpetic neuralgia. And the advantage, obviously, with a gel is that it can be easily applied to the different surfaces of the body, whether it be in the face or if it's on the feet or hands, or so it's easily applied. And obviously, you could see this being further developed into spray formulations or things that would suit other types of indications. So there are multiple opportunities, I would say.
Märta, have you a view about how these products could potentially how they could potentially fit into the treatment algorithm, and how should investors or listeners think in terms of treatment and prescription compliance rate and so on, or is it too early to?
No, I think, we can also discuss the potential for doing this, of course. And one thing is that I would say patients have more control if they say, okay, now I take this gel and I put it on my hand or my feet or whatever. it sort of gives you control of what you're doing. So from a patient perspective, I think that's very good. And also we shouldn't forget, it doesn't sound very business sexy to say that high safety for the drug is good. But today, when patients actually, half of patients who stop treatment do it because they don't tolerate the side effects. They can't drive a car. They forget things. They feel sick. They get constipated. A number of different things. They don't feel like themselves. If you have a drug that will help you, as good, but without those side effects, that's certainly going to be a very good business case and very much used. And there will be better compliance, treatment compliance, I would certainly say so. And also, I would say that it's an easier uptake in the primary care, because normally when you introduce a product especially for neuropathic pain, you actually have to go to the specialist, and they need to slowly but surely educate the primary care physicians to prescribe these treatments. And I think the uptake in primary care is going to be much easier with a topical product. So reaching a wider market in a shorter time frame.
Martin, have you done any thorough market analysis of the project at this step, or is it something that lies ahead of you?
What we are doing now, of course, first of all, we see this huge unmet medical need. I think that's so clear from all the presentations. Now, based on the efficacy data we are having, we are now evaluating different indications and so on. But I mean, it's such a big market and so many potential indications. And I mean, I would just say the opportunity is very, very big. Very big. And also what excites us regarding this project is it doesn't feel too complicated with regard to the development. We have the formulation, which apparently is working, and so on. So therefore, we see the opportunity to move forward quite quickly. And we have also already begun to look at other formulations and so on. But there is a huge unmet medical need. I mean, ACD440 is so big, and when it comes to TrkA-NAM, we talked about osteoarthritis, more than 250 million patients. Who knows if this would also be a treatment in lower back pain? There are more than 500 million patients. So I mean, the market opportunities for both projects are
but
substantial.
At this step, you are a bit cautious translating those figures into dollars and potential outcomes.
Yes, I would say so. So when we have, of course, when we have chosen the indication and we are presenting exactly what we will be going for, then we will, how should I say, become more exact on forecast. But it's substantial.
Mentioning in this context also that peripheral neuropathic pain is the biggest subgroup within neuropathic pain. So this is clearly an area that we're targeting.
And you have subtypes within peripheral.
Yes, exactly. Pain. So it's, I mean, they are huge groups, and certainly, as I think Märta showed on with current treatment such as the duloxetine and lidoderm and gabapentin. I mean, they have very limited efficacy in these patient populations.
Yeah. Exactly. And as Johan said, if we look at the total or estimated market for neuropathic pain, it's around, depending on what report you read, it's around $8 billion US dollars currently. There is a growth between 3 to 5%, depending on the report you are looking at. And as Johan pointed out, more than 60% of the prescriptions are for peripheral neuropathic pain. And as we hear from Märta, from Johan, the patients aren't satisfied with the current treatments. They are jumping off because of side effects. So if we can come with something which is really working, there should be a huge opportunity for us.
And but what I'm also trying to say is that, I mean, it should be rather good prospects to actually to offer a premium pricing well on the market. If it is first in class, something innovative that could potentially distinguish against the current options?
Absolutely. If we have higher efficacy and good safety from a health economic point, the price can be substantial, much higher than current generics, etc. So this is a great opportunity.
And so if we're moving over a little bit towards TrkA-NAM, that project. So there are two antibodies, tanezumab and fasinumab, that you talked about a little bit about, Pontus. So those have sort of validated this mechanism. They are antibodies, and they have had their controversies, both in development and regulatory. Sounds a little bit like aducanumab in the Alzheimer field that you're sort of referring to as a validated mechanism. And you say that, so the way you differ, you have a small, more selective molecule as far as the data you have generated so far. And that could potentially then translate into what in terms of more beneficial safety and efficacy?
Well, I think the selectivity of the TrkA-NAM molecule is key in obtaining a good risk-benefit ratio. I mean, that's something that has been very much on the discussion for the tanezumab with the FDA, that the risk-benefit ratio was actually not good enough. So avoiding some of the side effects that potentially could be due to the unselectivity of the anti-NGF antibody with respect to the P75 signaling, anything in that line could be a good approach forward, I think. There are also other, of course, beneficial things with a small molecule as compared to an antibody. I'm thinking of the half-life of the antibodies, which could be up to a month, whereas a small molecule often is disappeared after 1 day in the body. It's much easier to have a drug holiday using a small molecule as compared to an antibody. But I think the key for the TrkA-NAM is that we have a different mechanism than the anti-NGF antibodies.
And going back then, Martin, to business development, can you say how does it differ, your business development efforts in pain versus Alzheimer, your other main area, and how do you allocate time between those?
We are very active on both, and participating in the major BD conferences, and then we are then offering or seeking meetings with the different companies, and I would say we are putting the same effort on both, but now actually with 440 we are having coming into phase 2. We know that the interest is then growing, so we are putting even more effort into it. But we truly see interest in all our different projects. But we are very, very active. And what I can say here as well is that we look forward to drive the BD. We are now planning to publish more, come out with the data, and we are having at the upcoming JASP conference in end of June. We have 2 late-breaking abstracts, posters on TrkA-NAM and on ACD440. So we look forward to come out with this data to really drive the interest in our BD projects, to find partners, and yeah.
So what do you think they ultimately want to see? Is it data-driven in the end, of course, but
I mean, what I want to see is the big driver is, as we all know, it's efficacy, and then on the safety. But then also when you have well-validated mechanism like in TrkA-NAM, it's easier for these companies to potentially partner up earlier. So there, the preclinical data can also be a driver.
Right. Okay, so I would like to also dig into your organization a bit, and if you could elaborate a bit on the concept of your pain approach. So now we are talking about the two projects of yours. What's more behind it in terms of your in-house organization? Do you have research and discovery efforts in pain? Could it be more projects?
Guys.
I don't know. Do you want to go ahead, Johan, or should I?
Go ahead. You can.
I think we as a company are very well suited to drive both neurological projects like the NeuroRestore L-statin, but also the pain projects like TrkA-NAM and ACD440 due to our background within those two fields. Myself, I have a background in pain research and drug discovery for the last 20 years. I've been working with pain. Märta is a well-known expert in the pain area. Johan Sandin at AlzeCure has actually brought a product to the market within the pain field. So with that said, I think we are well suited to progress projects within these two different areas, pain and neurology.
Agree. And I mean, we've also now kind of further built up the development organization. So we've also within clinical operations, and as well as with Märta, the hiring of Märta, with an expertise both certainly within the pain area, but also within the neurology area, to trying to build further now, having two different projects in the clinical stage.
And I think we should also mention our abilities in vivo, which is really driving preclinical results. So please.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are certainly also building on the in vivo side, building both on setting up models in-house that are suitable for this. And so I think we have, as Pontus mentioned, we have been working in the CNS and pain area for most of our kind of job career. So this is home turf.
It wasn't like a coincidence that you all now we found pain.
No, CNS and pain has been our kind of major area, and obviously, so that's, I think that's the same. And also adding to what you talked about before about this, how we do the kind of early clinical trials. I think you will see this kind of pattern. We're planning it for the 856 in Alzheimer. We're also we did it here for 440, doing these kind of early efficacy signal trials. So trying to really dissect out early efficacy signals, because we know that is what triggers interest from third parties. So doing that at an early stage is something we will continue to do.
It is possible. You can have those models that really generate early efficacy data.
I think it's about really, and I think that's the way how a small company should act. We should try to be innovative in the way how we design the clinical trials. We can't do these kind of huge trials. We need to be smart, agile, and also design the clinical trials to get those critical endpoints that we believe will increase the confidence in moving forward into the phase 2 trials. So that's in the plans for all our projects, I would say.
And I think the track record, looking at what we now are doing with TrkA-NAM, what we have done with NeuroRestore, where we have the positive modulator, what we now are doing at AC440, that's quite impressive. And as we tried to explain before, and Pontus mentioned, the TrkA-NAM pain project came out of NeuroRestore, where we looked for a positive allosteric modulator to enhance neurotrophic signaling. And then we found a negative allosteric modulator, which is decreasing. So it is about, the knowledge we have is about how to steer neurotrophic signaling. And this we are using in Alzheimer's disease, symptomatic treatment, and now we are working with it in the pain area. And for us to spot both targets, create the molecules, and then go into research and development is quite impressive, I think.
So your development organization, then how do you plan? I don't know if I should direct to Märta. How do you plan to build up your key resources in-house versus make use of external experts?
I actually will take that because it's very much about economy. and building competence. So we have mapped out the future for the coming 5 years with all our different projects. We look at all the different positions and competence we need. So far, we have bought very much of the competence FTEs from the outside. Now, when we see that we have these projects and we see that it's more cost effective for us to hire and also for us to build the competence for the development, we are slowly progressive or slowly growing the organization. So that's the way we build it. So we look at the competence we need, and we also look at the economic risk of hiring people.
Right. And the chief medical officer was hired at the beginning of the year, and she is here with us in this panel discussion. So that was, of course, a key competence to have in-house. And how pleased are you with this recruitment?
Yeah, so we approached Märta when we had the ACD 440 and began to work with her last year, and we immediately saw the great fit. But Märta also worked with several of our colleagues at Big Pharma many years ago. And then we had a great chief medical officer before, Anne Jönsson. But then when we worked with Märta and we saw her ability within pain, but also Märta has experience from Alzheimer projects. So she was a perfect fit. And then Anne also wanted to move on. And then in the recruitment process, Märta said she would love to join the team. And
so I turn to you, Märta, and sorry for talking about you in third person. So why AlzeCure? Was it an easy choice to join management team?
Yes, I would say so. For one, I've actually been commuting on a weekly basis for many, many years. And then having this opportunity to find a company where I could actually use both of my previous experience within both fields of pain and CNS in general. And then also working in a company, although being small, also having early discovery, having the research, and also going into the clinical field. I think that is it's a fantastic opportunity that everyone doesn't have within biotech.
So what will be
it was an easy choice.
So what will be your key priorities, you would say?
Well, of course, it's going to be to run the clinical plan and run the clinical programs. And that needs to be, of course, from a cross-functional perspective. So having the clinical development organization, having that organized, but also but then that includes driving the project and doing it with high quality, of course, with high integrity and a smart regulatory strategy.
How important is KOL interactions at this point?
I would say that it's very important from many aspects. I mean, it's not KOL interactions. It's not something for. You should not start with marketing because then it's too late. You have to take the knowledge because we can't have all experts in-house. As Martin mentioned, but we also have to build on what's out there and have an ear to the ground and hear what are the latest progresses in science in the fields we are, and also to have our KOLs, engaged KOLs, have them get an interest for our programs and our molecules and help us design the best studies. We're, of course, designing the studies because that's our expertise, but they could also help us to guide into the best operational things in line with this.
Right. Okay, and there are some questions from the audience as well. Yeah, I think you need to, if you could highlight the upcoming milestones in respective projects once again, it would be, because it was one question, timeline for ACD phase 2A study. So maybe you can just reiterate your anticipated milestones.
Yes, for ACD 440, as I mentioned, we are planning a pre-IND meeting with FDA prior to the start of the phase 2A. We plan to submit the clinical trial application for the phase 2A study before the end of the year. So those are the main points, I would say.
And for you can just go as well for TrkA.
So for the TrkA-NAM program, we are running according to timelines. The anticipated time for CD selection is the second half of this year.
And then, almost as always, there's a question about your cash position and capital needs. So if you could reiterate what you have communicated to the market.
Absolutely. So the current cash position is 94 millions, as we communicated a couple of weeks ago.
Topical application and oral consumption could have different side effect patterns. Isn't the idea also to develop this as a tablet? I'm phrasing it, the question. I guess it's related to 440.
Yes, with regard to ACD 440, I think the real beauty of this is really maintaining a high concentration of the compound at the target site using a topical application, but at the same time avoid high systemic exposure of the compound and thereby avoiding the potential side effects. So here we're trying to maximize analgesic efficacy, at the same time minimizing risk for side effects by using the topical application. So I think for now we're going to move forward with the topical application. That's clearly so.
Okay. So we are running towards the end. So I'll get back to the projects because this is the essence of it. If we could just, I will ask each one of you, what's your vision for 440 and TrkA-NAM and how they could potentially fit and make a difference to the patients and on the market? Maybe I should take you the last.
Yeah, do that.
I start with Märta then.
Okay. Well, I think both of them have a huge opportunity. And for when it comes to 440, which has then progressed the farthest, we will quite soon, within a decent time frame, understand whether it is as good as we hope and believe it is. I think that the strength and what I see is that this can actually be something that is a totally new and different approach. Normally, topical would not necessarily be seen as something very fancy, but when it comes to internal organs, if you have a specific liver tumor treatment, it's considered high tech if you can actually just put your chemotherapy in the tumor and avoid the side effects. And I think the same goes for pain. And if the pain target is in the skin, that's actually what you should do. So I think this is actually high tech. And I think it has great opportunity to be used as a monotherapy or together with other types of pain relieving drugs. When it comes to TrkA-NAM, I think the possibility of having something as efficacious as the antibody first trials, but with less of a safety issue, I think that would be a huge benefit. And I think that would actually be really a game changer also for these patients, not the least for patients with low back pain, for who we cannot replace any joints.
Yeah. And Märta, you are familiar with the compound since before, and especially 440, isn't that so?
I've seen it before, yes.
Okay, we leave it there. So Pontus, your vision for your pain project.
Well, I agree with what Märta said, but on a personal note, I think these two projects are really two good examples of how we at AlzeCure Pharma, as a small pharma company, works in a clever, flexible, cost-effective way to bring very innovative projects forward. I mean, with the TrkA-NAM program, we took advantages of the know-how, the assets, the expertise within NeuroStore to carve out a new project within the TrkA-NAM and thereby cutting corners, saving time and money. And with the ACD440, it's really a unique example of how we as a small company in-license a very, very good asset, probably the best VR1 company or compound in the world, I don't know, maybe, and reformulate it and thereby bringing something to the patient that was not available before. I think it's so smart, actually.
I fully agree with Pontus and what Märta said. I think these are two highly innovative projects, and also, I mean, as we heard, we're really driving the projects in a cost-efficient way to really drive the value for our shareholders. This is really what we've done, both with regard to kind of carving out the TrkA-NAM program, as well as trying to look at early efficacy markers in the phase 1b trials. So I think we're really trying to maximize the value of these two assets, these highly innovative assets, I would say. I think, I mean, there's a huge unmet medical need. There's a huge market out there. I think the data so far looks really promising. So I'm very positive about the future for these two projects.
I would say it's about helping the patients in need. As we saw, there is a huge unmet medical need. To be able to develop products which really will help these patients is what the vision is about. And for us as a company, it's about making a difference. And I think we potentially can do it with both these projects.
So the time says 10:30. Any final remarks from you, Martin? Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks so much, Anders, for doing this. As you see from today's presentation, AlzeCure is moving along in a very, very nice way. We are so happy about the results we now have in 440. To be able as a company to prepare for becoming a phase 2 company is huge. For us to work within the space of pain where there is such an unmet medical need, and with that such an opportunity feels great. And then to complement this with our two projects, platforms we have within Alzheimer's disease, I think makes AlzeCure quite an amazing company. And we are developing very well, and we look forward to developing in the same time with this great team. So with that is my closing words.
Best of luck going forward, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Take care.